and I started working in my 20s at my parents' restaurant. And as I started working there, I started talking to some of the customers that would come in, including engineers and scientists, and you find out what they're doing for a living. And I was like, well, that's really cool. That's kind of where I should have gone, I think.
Welcome to LatinX Can, a podcast showcasing Latinx professionals who turn their dreams into realities. I'm your host, La Doctora Yanire Flores Salgado, and today I'm here with Dr. Luis Estevez, an entrepreneur who has taken advantage of the opportunities presented to him with the same drive characteristic of people who come to this country in search of a better future. And he's here to tell you, sí se puede, my friends, sí se puede. Dr. Luis Estevez, welcome to LatinX Can.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm beyond honored and excited to be here to talk about my experiences and to add to your terrific show.
I'm excited. And also, I want to say thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I know you're a busy person, and especially the circumstances today just made everything more difficult. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. You're getting me straight from the lab in the midst of trying to finish off a bunch of experiments, which is kind of fun, actually, to be honest. It's just, but now I get to enjoy my reward, which is just get to talk and hang out, which I kind of like to do.
So let's start talking a little bit about your story and where your story begins.
Sure. So I'm a first generation American. I am Latinx, and of course, and basically my story starts with my parents coming here as immigrants to this country. My father at first was the first one to arrive, and they came from two different countries. My father came from Spain, and he started, he's got an interesting story of himself. He basically was in Spain right after the Spanish Civil War. There was a lot of poverty. There's not a lot of money around. So his parents left to go to Brazil to basically work at a Volkswagen factory and send money back home. And
wow.
Yeah. And then basically sometime, I think he was around 15 or 16, he was like, I'm done with this place. I need to kind of make my own mark. So he went to Brazil first, worked at the Volkswagen plant, then got this entrepreneurial bug and started his own bar there in Brazil. And then that didn't work out. So then he just according to him, took whatever money he had extra, went to the United States through Mexico. And he said Mexico's kind of a fun place. So that emptied out my wallet. And then I ended up in New York City looking for a job. And he had some connections in construction, and he didn't like that as much. And then he actually started working in the restaurant, and that just took for him. He was like, this is my thing. And he started working in the restaurant business all the way from the bottom all the way to he became eventually the head chef of El Faro in New York City, at the Spanish restaurant in New York City. And while he was working there, my mother, who was visiting from Chile, she went to go hang out with her cousin, who was a waiter in the restaurant my dad was working at. And the waiter couldn't get off from work. So the story goes, he was like, hey, I'm looking for someone to hang out with my cousin. I can't hang out with her tonight. And my dad was like, oh, I have off. Is she cute? And he's like, yeah, she's pretty cute. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. And then, they kind of started hanging out. They hit it off. And then, she stayed there. They decided to make a life there. And they kind of, much to their credit, just decided this is where we're going to start a family. This is where and they just, without too much of a support system, they just kind of had, got married, had me, brother and sister right after that. So, and I grew up in Queens and New York City. I loved it.
Yeah. I just realized, do you used to watch Friends, the sitcom?
Yes, I have.
So your parents' story is like Emily and Ross when Ross is asked to pick her up or to show her around New York City, and then they end up getting married.
You're right. Oh my God, I never realized that my life is based on a friend's
and a sitcom.
That's awesome. I didn't even realize that. But yeah, love finds a way, I guess.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about what was it like growing up in Queens?
I love Queens. The area that I grew up in was in Woodside, but I grew up around the Jackson Heights area, Queens, Astoria, around that area. And it's like such a culturally diverse spot. And, you just take it for granted when you're a kid. I grew up speaking only Spanish, actually, when I was, when I started speaking, because my parents only spoke Spanish. And, my father worked in a restaurant where he spoke predominantly Spanish and picked up some English, but in the house, he always spoke Spanish. And the same thing with my mom. And so I only learned English when I went to preschool. But it was I just couldn't believe how, at the time I didn't realize it, but I think actually the area that I'm from is the most diverse square footage you can find on the earth, apparently. Like it's like most languages spoken. And I just thought this is how the world was, because I was a kid, and then later you grow up and you go elsewhere, and you're like, oh, you kind of miss it. You miss the culture, the food, the interacting with different viewpoints, different. I'm going to talk a little bit about New York City. I know we're here to talk about.
No, go ahead. I actually like New York City. We lived there. I mean, in New York for a little bit, and it was fun.
Oh man, I got to say, to me, the most beautiful thing New York brings to the table. Other cities have bigger populations, denser populations, taller buildings, whatever kind of rubric you want to measure a city by. Subway systems that are like way more vast and blah, 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 I don't know, whatever. You can use whatever algorithm you want to define like greatness in a city. But to me, what makes New York City stand out above all cities is this place where, unlike any other city, and it does it better than any other, where all kinds of disparate peoples, culture, religions, all kind of come together in one spot, and they all become New Yorkers. Like, I mean, you have your pride and your ethnic background, but you're kind of like a New Yorker. And then you have like kids and they're just like New Yorkers too. It's just like, and then it's like, yeah, I'm a New Yorker, but my parents are from Chile and Spain, but it's like, and it's just kind of this perfect, or at least the best I've seen as far as acclimating all kinds of different people and cultures and ethnicities and throwing them all together and getting them to hang out together. It's amazing.
Yeah, to coexist.
Yeah. I think New York does that better than anybody else. And that's a big source of pride for me, being a former New Yorker.
And I think one of the things that I noticed when we were there is that it's a hard city to live in. I think it's not easy. It's expensive. It's big, loud. Everything's far. But everybody finds opportunities, right? Yeah. And so there is support for people. And I was always amazed by that. It's like, why would people want to live in New York City? I asked myself all the time because it was so expensive. And then I was like, well, but everybody finds a way. And I think that's what makes a difference.
Yeah. And there is like a big sense of community there. And you find that in other places too, for sure.
Yeah. And so you grew up in the restaurant business because that was the family business, right? And that means being exposed to a lot of people from minority backgrounds, oftentimes immigrants who are working hard in the pursuit of the American dream. What was that experience like for you, and what did it teach you growing up?
I love that question because the restaurant business taught me everything. Like I always tell people, if they have kids and they want them to get them some kind of work experience that's like real world, forget a paper route, get them in the restaurant business, because you interact with customers, with people, you learn how to work in a team environment to get stuff done that seems impossible. Like you basically, you get like a busload of people that seems like they just come in all at once, and you just like, you have to somehow deal with it. And, when I became an engineer and a scientist, it's the same kind of thing. You get like all these problems thrown at you and all these fires, and you can't panic. You just have to put them in priority, figure out how to do it. And then oftentimes you have to work in a team. You have to interact with people, and you learn the value of not just being able to provide, if you're a good waiter, that's great. But if you're a good waiter with a terrible attitude that no one likes to work with, that's useless to me.
Yeah.
So, and it's the same thing when you're in a group working as an engineer or a scientist on some project. It's like, you have to learn how to get along with people. You have to learn how to interact with customers. And so that provided the basis and platform for everything that I've achieved after that, I think.
And so growing up, you were following the path that most parents who are immigrants want their children to follow. You finish high school, you get into college, and then try to get a degree that can give you a stable career, right? Like that's the immigrant's parents' dream. So you got into college at age 18, and then you decided that college maybe wasn't for you. What was that initial experience in college like, and what motivated you to drop out of college a couple of years later?
That's a great question, because honestly, my recent history is like so steeped in academia that, like, especially with some of the students that I mentor and some of the folks I talk to, I'm like, oh yeah, my first attempt at college was like a complete misalignment of my academic proclivities. And honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. And I think most of it, I mean, I basically wandered almost into a psychology major because I didn't know kind of what I was doing. I didn't know what college was all about. Like, high school was like a little bit more structured, and I could kind of just follow along, and there's not a lot of leeway for coursework and this kind of thing. And when I went to college, I went to Binghamton University. It was like a really nice school, and my parents were like really excited and happy, and so was I. But like, my parents had, my dad never made it, I don't think, past high school, and my mom may have had some college, but I don't think so. So we were like an academic family. We were blue collar types. We worked in construction and restaurants, obviously, and this kind of thing. And so I was the firstborn kid in this new country where my parents didn't know how, even if they like had an academic past, they were in a new country and they didn't know how the system worked at all. So I was essentially a guinea pig. I just didn't know what I was doing. I remember wandering into registration and not having a single clue. Like, I was just, I had these kind of like Scantron sheets to fill out what classes I wanted. And I was just like, and everybody seemed to know what they were doing. Everyone's just wandering into lines and kind of picking classes. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, what? I had no clue. And, and so I just kind of took a bunch of classes. I tended to do either get A's or F's. So my GPA hovered around a 2. Like, I was like essentially just all over the map, depending on how focused I was in that class or whether I liked it or not. And I just kind of, I realized at some point, I'm like, this isn't really working. And I was lucky enough that I had the restaurant where I was working on summer and winter breaks. And I was basically making decent money there where I can pay for my tuition because it was a state school. And at the time, it was a lot cheaper. Yeah. So I ended up with no loans or student debt or anything like that. But I just, I kind of like had a bunch of years there where I just kind of like, I guess, lived a college life of sorts, but didn't really get anywhere academically. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That's good enough. I went back to the restaurant and I started working in my 20s at my parents' restaurant. And as I started working there, I started like talking to some of the customers that would come in, including engineers and scientists, and you find out what they're doing for a living. And I had no idea what that was like. I didn't know what engineers did. I didn't know what scientists did. But I was like, well, that's really cool. That's kind of where I should have gone, I think. And then I started finding out what they did for a living, and I started realizing, oh, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that. And so now it's like my late 20s, and at this point, I'm with my girlfriend there, and she's like, well, it's not too late. Why don't you, if that's what you want to do, you should do that. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm already old. Like, I'm like 29. Yeah. I don't know if I can do it. But then I was like, you know what? She's right. Like, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And why not? Like, I have this opportunity. I may as well give it a shot. So I basically decided to move to Maine with who is now my wife, Erin, but my girlfriend at the time. I pursued a degree in mechanical engineering because I loved energy systems, turbines. I was really into energy systems at the time, and I wanted to learn how it worked, and I wanted to do some kind of career with that. And so I just kind of went into it. I remember they looked at my transcript and they were like, "You're all over the map here. Like, just like all A's and F's." Like, and I was like, "Yeah, I understand, but that was a long time ago." And I also did community college for a year. I had 2 semesters worth of science and math courses to kind of remember all the science and math I'd forgotten basically from high school. Yeah. And I took like pre-calc and physics and, just things of that nature to kind of be almost like a high school student with a level of science that I kind of had forgotten in 14 years or so.
there's something that you said that really hit home for me. And it's that, the first time you went to college, you sort of wandered into a major because you didn't really know what you were doing. And then the second time around, you learned from somebody, from your customers in this instance, of what is it like to be an engineer?
Yeah.
What does it take to be an engineer? And so that speaks so much about the power of representation, right?
100%.
Even though, your customers, I don't know if they were white or Latinx or whatever they were, but just having somebody who can show you that you can do it, it makes such a difference.
So very true. Because I didn't have an aunt or an uncle or some kind of scientist or engineer in our family. We didn't. Again, my family comes from blue collar types. So it was a revelation to speak to someone like that. And, you get to be pretty close with the folks that come into the restaurant and some of the regulars. And the restaurant's in Long Island, which is like a semi well-to-do kind of area. And at least the area that we're in. So it's like a lot of well-to-do engineer types, business types, that kind of thing. But like the engineers and scientists, I was like, whoa, they do cool work. Like, you find out what they do. And you're like, that's so awesome. I wish I was, I like my work that I did at the restaurant. I was a bartender, maitre d'. I was mostly handling the outside of the restaurant, which I really enjoyed. But I was like, wow, that's. I think that would have been my thing. And then when I got to do it, to actually have a chance to do it again, that was really cool. And that at first, I gotta say, it was like completely overwhelming. Like you wander into this major that's like so math heavy and so intensive, and you haven't taken a math course in like forever. And you just kind of like, you're just trying to survive. And I think I often say you feel like an elephant trying to play the piano, and you're just like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, how did I get here? Like, I don't even know these paws are not made to play the piano. You just kind of, you feel totally out of sync, but that kind of motivates you a bit. And then actually compared to working in a quote unquote regular job in the real world, 60 hours a week in a restaurant, going back to college and doing college, like I was like, oh, I just do 40 hours of studying and work, and which is like easier than the work, at least not easier physically than the work I was doing. It was like, okay, I can do this. And I just kind of, and I jumped into it. I really took to it. I knew what I was doing. I was like, older, and I wasn't like an 18-year-old kid anymore, just trying to find my way. I was like, I kind of had figured out who I was at that point.
Oh, I remember showing up to my chemistry lab it was my birthday one time, and it was a Thursday, and I had chemistry lab in the morning, organic chemistry lab, and I showed up with like a happy birthday tiara because I wanted everybody else to know that it was my birthday too.
Nice. I like it.
But I was like so immature, right? Like I just want the entire campus to know that it is my birthday.
I mean, at least
I showed up.
That's right. As opposed to just kind of like, just sometimes apply myself and sometimes not. But that all changed when I like I said, when I went to my second go round, I was like, oh, I'm all in, and I realized like, oh wow, I have this tremendous opportunity. I had Aaron, who was supporting me too financially, and at that point now I had to take loans and stuff. So I was like, okay, I really got to like do this and make sure I do this well. And then I started looking, and that actually led to, and my whole path to where I am now just has started, it's a series of interesting decision points and taking like kind of a choice or a fork in the road that like looks more interesting, kind of like hitting that. And that happened, like, that's how I pursued my PhD. I was working for a professor, this guy, Mick Thompson. And a lot of where I am now is because there's like so many people along the way who saw me and kind of said like, oh, here's a guy who's seems to kind of have a lot of drive and determination, but maybe needs a little guidance because he doesn't know too much what he's doing. Yeah, right. And so I think he kind of saw that, and I did some research for him in the lab, and I loved it. I was like, this is a lot of fun, like to just do some research. And then he said, you should apply for this internship at Los Alamos National Lab. And I was like, okay. And I looked into it, and I was like, whoa, they pay the most out of all the internships. Like, I definitely want to get this one, because at the time I was like, I needed money basically. And then so I got into it, and it was like this. It's called a Summer Dynamics School or something like that. And it was this thing that Los Alamos did to kind of bring in all kinds of junior level engineers and kind of introduce them to research. And I was like, that sounds cool. I mean, whatever it was, it sounded cool. And then I got actually introduced to, cutting edge research. We got to do really like write a research paper, go to a conference, present it, and do all the work to do it. And I just couldn't believe people got paid to do this. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, is this a scam? Like, you're basically paid to like have fun in the lab and try to answer questions that no one has answered before. Like, I was like totally hooked. I was like, this is what I need to do for the rest of my life. How do I do this? And of course, the mentors that we had there were like, well, you need to get a PhD. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to get a PhD. So I called up my
minor thing.
Yeah. I just
you just have
check
to go.
mark, on the way. Like, like, got it, PhD.
I'll be back in 5 years. I got you.
Toothbrush, check. Swim trunks, check. PhD, sure, check. Like, got it. Just put it on the shopping list. But I mean, that's kind of how it was.
Yeah. The other thing I want to ask you is, after the first round in college, you went to work at your parents' restaurant. It was a stable business, right? It could have given you, money to live comfortably. And it's an honest job. It can be lucrative. It's a fulfilling life. But you decided to look more than what was in front of you, to look beyond. And I see sometimes with some of the Latinx people, young people that I'm exposed to, is that sometimes it doesn't seem like they think it's worthy to make that sacrifice, to go and get the student loans. Sometimes getting paid $25 an hour when you're 18 years old is a lot of money, and it looks like you can live comfortably like that. And so that's where they stay, right? And so I wonder, what motivated you to just look beyond that? Yeah,
I like that question a lot, because honestly, I at some point realized this, that in essence, I was almost playing with house money. Like and this harkens back to what I mentioned earlier about, where I am today is mostly luck. And then also has to do with the fact that I was, born where I was. I kind of hit the genetic lottery, both in where I was born and who I was born to. My parents were like really supportive, and you kind of, realizing this somewhat, I don't know, I wouldn't say early in life, but realizing it early enough that I can say, hey, let me take advantage of this, because I, at the time I didn't have any kids or anything. And, I had my girlfriend and now my wife, and we were, we were fine. Like, we could like live on ramen noodles, and we didn't have like a giant economic drain or anything. So we're like, so at that point, it's like, why not? You have this opportunity. I happen to, like I said, hit the genetic lottery by being born into a country that has like so many opportunities. And I was able to, I was like, why not? Like, let me just take advantage of this. And, sure. Like, knowing that, the restaurant was there was nice, but I didn't even think of it as like a backup or anything like that. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And, and I can do this. And that's, and seeing that, it just took applying that drive and determination that I saw from others that were immigrants to this country, working at the restaurant and kind of doing what they had to do to make it, and saying like, hey, I have this opportunity. I can do this. Let me just chase what I want to do. And plus, when you're a little older, like mid-20s to late 20s, like I was, almost 30 at this point, you're only like answering to yourself for the most part. Like when you're younger, when you're 16 or whatever, you're kind of answering to your parents. And even 18, even though technically you're an adult, you're kind of still like a little bit in their shadow. And then at this point, when you're older, you're just like, I don't care. I'm just doing things because I want to do them, and and if you fall down on your face, you fall down on your face. There's not it's not like, oh no, what's this going to mean? Or what's this, this fear of failure. And actually not having this fear of failure early on to pursue this path served me well, because that, being a scientist, that's like, if you have, it's all failure. It's like
you gotta be able to take those in, because
that's exactly right. Like, I mean, you're just failing most of the time, and every once in a while you get something that goes right, and it's like a lot of glory. Like, so it actually was pretty good, like to not be scared of failure and just go for it, because again, when you're young enough and you don't have kids and you don't have like other types of responsibilities, you can live pretty minimally, and as long as you're working hard to get where you want to go, and you have a place that has opportunities like I was lucky enough to have, then it's just applying that formula and doing it, really.
Yeah. I think because I think about that question a lot, and a lot of my friends are also immigrants, and the way that we got to be in this country is because we needed to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the population, and the way to do that was to get a PhD, because they pay us, right? It's not in STEM. It's something that you get paid decent money. You're not going to be rich, but if you're by yourself, you can live with $20,000 in College Station,
exactly.
Right? Not in New York, maybe, but in College Station, Texas, it's okay,
exactly.
And so for us, we didn't have many choices, right? So we had to put in the work at the beginning and leave all our sacrifice on the table when we were 25 to 32 years old, and then hoping that that's going to pay off in the future. And that's just how we did it, right? But for now, having gone through it and living the privileged life that I live now, it's like it was worth it. It was worth it putting all the sacrifice and effort up front. Now I get to reap the benefits.
That's exactly right. But I wish I could say that I had some foresight. Like, it sounds like you had a much smarter plan that you had.
No. I think it was we don't have many choices, and this is the one path that they drew up for us. So we'll follow that one.
I've lived I think an exceedingly privileged life to be able to essentially just say, I choose to do this, and then just do it. I mean, granted, there's a lot of work that comes with it, right? Like getting a mechanical engineering degree and then turning that into an application for a PhD program I was at Cornell University, and it's a pretty selective program, but it's kind of a not an easy one either. Especially I went in from mechanical engineering to material science, so then I had to learn a chemistry heavy materials. And I was like, all of a sudden, like all the stuff that I didn't like to do as a mechie. And I was like, I don't care about chemistry. I only need to know that for combustion processes and this kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, like, this is my whole world now. It's like all I do is chemistry.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, and again, when I was at PhD at Cornell, surrounded by brilliant fellow students, surrounded by brilliant professors. I mean, just like really just heady people, and you're like, oh my god, I think I made a terrible mistake. I'm back to being the elephant at the piano. Like, oh no, like here we go again. But then you just kind of go, okay, that's fine. Other people have done this. You can do this too. And one of my friends told me that once, like, because I was like, I don't know, this is crazy. Like, what is this hubris? Like, was me thinking I can survive in a PhD program? Because you get thrown into it, and you just, it's much like that day with my Scantron sheet, like trying to figure out what classes to take. I was like, I guess I have to find an advisor, and I guess I have to like figure out what my research is. And you're kind of, I mean, I was lucky that my advisor ended up being like a seriously good mentor who took his job seriously as a mentor, but not a lot of, advisors do, right? So, and so it's a bit of a meat grinder. But, I'd been through that before, and I was like, okay, I know how to deal with this. Like, I start just talking to people and asking older upperclassmen, and they're kind enough to pay it forward. And you form a cadre with your colleagues, right? So the incoming class that we had in our department was like something like a dozen-ish students, which was like pretty big for a small department. And so we were all super tight. Right away, we all just like, we were panicked because we're like, there's this thing called qualifiers that we have to take. This totally terrifying thing.
Yeah. So the people that come in with you are like los compañeros de guerra.
Totalmente.
It's like everybody's there just in the trenches, and then we're like, okay, how do we get out of here?
That's right. It's crazy. You get thrown into it, and you have this giant test where you can pass and fail, and if you fail, you're out of the program. And so I remember that first year, it was really rough, and we were studying so you're trying to survive your classes, you're trying to survive a new place and you're trying to do maybe some research if you get the chance to, but you're like completely incompetent in the lab because it's the first time you're trying to do research and you're just trying to tag along behind some experienced postdoc or senior student, trying not to like mess up too badly or make their lives too difficult, and mostly just going on their kindness of trying to help you along. And you're doing all this, and then you're like, oh, now I have this like tremendous test to take at the end of it.
So you've been saying these things, like you sort of put yourself in positions where you're an elephant playing piano, and you developed this entire career in academia. You became a PhD, then worked at a national lab. But now you're an entrepreneur, right?
Crazy.
Like if I go to LinkedIn now, your title is, I think, owner and founder at AIMM, Advanced and Innovative Multifunctional Materials.
Correct.
So how do you become an entrepreneur and then, went back to playing the piano?
Right. I'm back at the piano in my in my usual elephant skin, like being like, what the hell am I doing? Like, it's, so that was actually, that's pretty recent. So, that's been since like almost 2 years now. So essentially, I had spent, so after I finished my PhD, I had worked with porous materials and worked with them in energy storage applications, fuel cells, batteries, this kind of thing. And then I kind of want, and again, I got to a decision point where it's like, what type of job do I want? And then I was like, oh, I guess I got to like, grad school is weird because as soon as you get kind of good at it and you're like, oh, I'm comfortable. Then they're like, all right, get out of here now. Like, as soon as you're like kind of semi-comfortable and feel like, I think I can produce here. It's like, good, now get out of here. Like, get your degree, get out. It's like, okay. So then you have to find a job and like a quote unquote real job. And I had a job offer from a Fortune 500 company. It was a really nice offer and I got nothing else. And I was like, and my advisor was like, this is what you need to take. And I'm like, no, I kind of want to do my own thing. And I just kind of like, again, I don't know if it's hubris or just like kind of what I want to do, but I kind of was like, I want to develop my own materials and I want to develop these porous carbon materials for energy storage. And there's this fellowship at a national laboratory, Pacific Northwest National Labs, and I want to go there and work on it there. And I sent in an application. I went through the first round, and I'm like, I'm just going to hold off on this and say no to the other job. And he's like, those are hard to get. Like, you should take this job, and then if you get the other thing, great. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna do a postdoc here. Like, if you have me. And he was like, if you want me to underpay you for like work, then by all means go for it. Like, it's kind of like what he said. He was really pushing me. He was like, you need to like now cash in. You've put in all this work. And I was like, but I'm kind of like, I had this idea. I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I actually got that fellowship and I developed my own materials for over the course of 3 years there for energy storage. And in the midst of it, I was like, you know what? These would be really great for water treatment. So then as that fellowship was ending, I was like, I need to get the next job someplace where I can develop my own research and do what I want to do. And I found the University of Dayton Research Institute was this place that like I had a colleague who worked there and she basically said, whatever research you want to do, if you can get it funded, you can do it here. They don't care. Like, and I was like, that's perfect. That's what I want. So I came here to Dayton, Ohio, and from the Pacific Northwest.
Not New York City.
But the pizza, I gotta say, sorry, Eastern Washington, but the pizza's better in Dayton than I was like closer. I was like the pizza's like generally my rule for like how to define a city almost. And like I was like, the pizza here is better than it was in Eastern Washington. So I was like, okay, this is a step up. Like, that's good. But then I came here and started working on my own research. And then while I was doing that here, this is what's cool about Dayton. It has this like entrepreneurial spirit. Like, this is the birthplace of the Wright brothers is Dayton, Ohio. And that's where they had their bicycle shop, where they took their plane to the Kitty Hawk to fly and all that. So this is like an entrepreneurial hub, and it's contagious almost. And then I started realizing I'm working on these porous materials that will be great as water filters to take basically dirty, contaminated water and then just treat it like a Brita pitcher where you just pour it over the top and out the bottom comes clean, disinfected, good tasting water. And I was like, this is actually has some commercial legs, but I don't really know how to do that. I'm like a scientist. I've spent like 15 years developing this stuff. I have some entrepreneurial experience from working in the restaurant business, but this is a whole kind of different world. So then I tapped into the resources here in Dayton, including the Entrepreneurial Center. Also, the University of Dayton started this tech transfer program at this very serendipitously right at the same time as I was trying to commercialize my technology, and they were like, "Oh, great! Here we have this new program." I was like, "Perfect!" And like just kind of, it all kind of hit together. And then I founded my company in 2019, and I was doing it kind of on the side, and then I was working at UDRI, and then in January of 2021, I left UDRI and just did AIMM full time.
Wow.
So, and since then it's been going great. Like, but it's again very similar to just all my weird life choices that I've made up until this point, where like just kind of reinvent myself and try something new. I just had to learn a lot about how to be an entrepreneur, how to leave behind some of my tendencies and how to pitch and give presentations and talks. As a scientist, world's different. How it is.
Totally.
So I had to learn all that and kind of. But I have great mentors and great people who again, really lucky to have people who are kind of helping me out. And so far it's been going great. Like I'm really excited where the company is and where it's going. And I'm kind of, there's moments where I tell my wife, we'll pause for a second, just be like, hey, this is kind of working. And it's like, yeah, that's crazy. Like, yeah, I know. Like it's actually, it's like, and in a way with our startup, the science part is almost like the easy part. It's all the other stuff that's
yeah. Well, it's the easy part, but it's not the easy part to learn.
Yeah, right.
It's the easy part because it's what you've done for all this part, like for your entire, because I look at it the other way, right? Like now I work in marketing, but I have a PhD, and I was talking about, I was talking with my boss about this today. It's like we are able to come in and just learn the technical part, and then the commercial part is easy.
I see.
It's like the learning how porous materials work. That's not easy for a marketing person to come in and learn, right? Like somebody who doesn't have a technical background, is not easy to, for them to learn that. It's going to take them forever to just sort of like try to understand how you go through a filtration,
That's
right. So
that is true. Yeah.
And I think I say that because I think as scientists, sometimes like, we get beat down, right? Like we're like, oh, these people just talk too complicated. They don't know how to communicate concisely. And so I'm like, okay, sure, fine. But that can be learned easily. Sit down and do quantum mechanics and we'll talk about it.
That's awesome. I love that. But you're right. These are all learnable skills. Everything is learnable. You just have to put a lot of effort and resources and have the opportunity to do it. And you have those things, you're set, and it's oftentimes the opportunity is the tough part, because that's based on a lot of lucky factors. It's really true that as a scientist, you kind of forget that science part, even though it seems kind of, I wouldn't say easy, but it is the easy part in this AIMM equation. As my company is like, I can always rely on the science. It's like, I can always know that we're able to do things that nobody else can do as far as science and engineering wise. But you forget that that's like your trump card almost, because until you start, like you get an intern, let's say, and then they'll say something like, wow, that's so cool. How does that work? We can do that? And you're like, yeah, of course we can. Like that's a whole spiel. And they're like, wow, how does it like, that's amazing. You're like, and you kind of like, oh yeah, I guess it is kind of cool that we could do that. Like, it's like, yeah. You forget, like you're like, oh, it is kind of like, all right. It's not bad that we can do that. That's pretty cool. Like I gotta say, so it's nice to get that perspective from other eyes at times.
Yeah, and in addition to being a scientist and entrepreneur, you're also a podcaster.
That's right.
And you have your own podcast, right? It's called "What's the PhD Deal?"
Yeah.
Tell us more about the idea behind the podcast and what you are trying to accomplish.
Thank you. That's first of all, like yourself, I kind of felt inspired to put a podcast out there that puts something into a community that maybe is underserved, right? And so for us, it's this feeling that I had when I went into the PhD program is not unique, right? Like of just jumping into the fire almost, and it just not having a guidebook, because every PhD program is different in certain aspects, and everybody's experience is different. But there's general things that would be helpful to know to start off. And I was like, there should be a guidebook. Like there's no guidebook. There's There's nothing out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was talking about this with a buddy of mine who was actually another, the fellowship that I had was the Pauling Fellowship. And he was a new Pauling Fellow that came in after me. Really smart, really cool guy. This guy, Elias from Lebanon. And he basically, said, hey, I felt the same way. And I started this website called What's the PhD Deal? And I was like, oh man, that's a really cool name. And he's like, and he has like topics there, how to survive a PhD program. And I'm like, this has the makings of a good podcast. We can and then we were talking with a friend of ours while we were talking about this, Liz, and she's like, I want in. And we're like, great. And then Raj and my other buddy, Rajan, was like, I totally want in too. And so like the four of us got together and we started this podcast where we essentially covered topics. We had season 1 and that was essentially, topic 1. Should you go for a PhD? What does a PhD mean? Like, so like the beginning questions, and then finding an advisor, how to survive the meat grinder that is grad school. Like lots of horror stories, lots of and it got really personal, like because what helped me survive grad school was finding others like me that were struggling, that I didn't know were struggling. Like to me, I was like, everyone seemed to know what they were doing, and like I was like, I feel like the only one trying to survive. And then you start talking to them, and they're like, oh, I feel completely inadequate, and you're like, what are you talking about? You're like a science rock star. You're like, you're like, no. And, and so you start to realize everyone feels this way and it's not unique. And in fact, it's okay to feel this way. And it gets better as long as, you put in effort, start talking to people and start. So we kind of wanted to do that and put it out there. And it's like a really tiny audience, right? Like PhD students that are freaking out. But
you're like 1% of the total global population or something.
That's right. But I was like, you know what, there's a lot of kids and I saw it when I was a PhD student just freaking out, because they're if you're in a PhD program, generally you've been a high achievement academic person like usually your whole life, right? And then all of a sudden you're at this one spot where there's no plan. There's no like syllabus that says like, you have to do it's open-ended research, especially in the STEM field. And you're just kind of, you're just hopefully have an advisor or some upperclassmen that have enough of their completely filled up schedule, like some iota of time that can kind of guide you a little bit, but more or less you're on your own. So we just wanted to put something out there that can help that.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because I think about this a lot. It's like I'm a smart person, but I'm not the smartest person in the room. Especially not in grad school. I felt like that too, yeah. And so, like, some people ask me, like when they ask me, what do you do? And I said, oh, I have a PhD in chemistry. They're like, wow, you must be really smart. And I go like, I mean, I am. I'm not diminishing my ability to think, to think properly or to be intelligent. But I think I work harder than I am smart. I'm more disciplined. I'm more strategic than smart. And I think that's what helped me get through my PhD.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I'm more of a hard worker, and I'm lucky that I'm not scared of failure, or like I tend to be. I get maybe not having a successful early college career like helped me, because I was like, okay, it's not the end of the world, and just having that ability to see that's really that's incredibly helpful. Like just being able to not panic and work hard I always felt what you said. Like I was like, you know what, I may not be the smartest person. I'm smart. Like I know what I'm doing, but I mean, I'll outwork like just about anyone.
Yeah.
Like, I put in the time and from it comes the results and the skills. It's like you got to put in the work. And so I remember something that my buddy told me when I was going into, like I said, going into PhD program. He was like, hey, other people have done this. You can do this. Like anybody who's done it, it doesn't have superpowers. They're just human like you are,
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what, that's true. Other people have done it. I should be able to do it. Like if I'm smart enough and I work hard enough, I have the formula. I should be able to do it,
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's great to talk about this, because people need to sort of lose the fear,
Completely.
demystify that this is just like some unattainable thing to get to. It's not. It requires a lot of
Yes.
work, and they're not the easiest years of your life, but it's not unattainable.
For two things. One, I love that you said demystify, because that's like one of our taglines of our podcast is demystifying the PhD process. I like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then the other thing, I tell, like, I will have conversations with people on airplanes, and they'll say, like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a scientist. And they're like, well, at least back when I was a scientist. I guess now I'd say I'm an entrepreneur.
An
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
And then probably like, oh, just some guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like, but I say a scientist, and I'm like, whoa, you're a scientist. That's like, how does that work? I'm like, well, I got my PhD in material science, and I work with porous materials doing this and that. And they're like, that's crazy. Like, I could never do that. I'm like, actually, you could. Like, it would just take 10 years of work and effort, and but you could do it. Like, and to me, it's like looking at someone who plays the piano really well or something, and just a virtuoso, and just being like, I could never do that. It's like, well, yeah, of course you can. If you put in, 8-10 hours a day of work for 10 years, guaranteed you'll be a pretty good piano player. But I mean, you have to put in that work. It's I people are like, I could never do that. I'm like, you may not want to do that. It may not be a good fit for you, and that's totally fine. But if you like it, you should go for it, because you most certainly can do it. Like, if you have a functioning brain and you have the work ethic, you got it. Like, that's it. Then you just add time to the equation. 10 years later, boom, you're exactly where I'm at.
Yeah. It's true. You just gotta keep at it.
Yeah. I think that's really important, because I did a lot of outreach, because I look a little weird compared to most scientists. I have like the mohawk and the giant beard, and like, so I always got pegged for like send Luis to do outreach, like to kids in high school and middle school and that kind of thing. But I loved it, and I loved telling them, like, they're like, wow, you must be really smart. I'm like, well, I'm smart enough, but like, I don't know. Like, so are you, by the way. Like,
right.
There's no real secret to it. Like, if you want to do what I do, you just do it. It's going to take effort and time and a lot of crying and frustration. But after some blood, sweat, and tears, 10 years later, boom, you're exactly where I'm at. Like, there's no secret to it.
That's great. I mean, I think it's just something that we just need to continue talking about. But having gone through it all, right, and then having created a space to sort of support new PhD students in that endeavor that they're getting into, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for a person that's getting into a PhD, and what is your life-saving kit that you would give them?
That's right off the bat. Get yourself a good crew. Get yourself, like you said, comrades in arms, like that you can go to battle with. You need a support system, and try to find people who are colleagues of yours, right? Who are in the same position, because that's incredibly beneficial. Because you're it was a very Shakespearean thing, right? He who sheds blood with me, I shall call my brother. Right? That's and of course, same is true for sister. But like, you find colleagues who you're going into this PhD program as a complete meat grinder. So you're going into it together. Find those people who are with you who are doing it with you, and guaranteed you're going to have similar problems, similar things that you'll be better able to solve and work on together versus by yourself. So definitely get a crew.
Yeah.
I think that probably the other piece of advice I would say is and this is probably the most important thing, actually. So even though a crew to me is like my personal favorite piece of advice, number one thing is get an advisor that fits you. Like, that's got forget the program, forget the research. I mean, those are important factors, of course. But if your advisor and you do not mix, it's going to be a horrific 5-6 years, whatever it takes to finish a PhD. So, and there's no perfect advisor for everybody, right? Like, it's just your personality and your work style and theirs, and how they and realizing that. And of course, an extra piece of advice would be to start going through the What's the PhD podcast, because we'll go through all the stuff. but of course, but I would say, yeah, find an advisor that meshes with you. If you're somebody who knows that they like a hands-off approach and they like to just be a little more independent, then find an advisor that likes to do that. If you're someone who needs more direction, find an advisor who's going to be like, a bit more over your shoulder, and that's dependent on you so you have to know who you are, and you have to know what type of advisor, and then talk to the upperclassmen, the graduate students, to find out like what it's like to work for them, and they'll give you the
buy them beer.
Oh yeah, and they'll tell you everything over a beer. Like, I used to tell students, their prospective students, all the time, like what they want to know. Like, it's like I tell them, like, my advisor was pretty hands off, and I liked it. It worked really well for me. But I told them, like, if you need direction, you're going to flounder here, because you're or need to have some kind of structure. Like, it's going to be a little tough, like, because you kind of have to find your thing. Go with it. I mean, of course, I got mentorship and everything, but I mean, he was just an older professor who was like a little more hands off. It was established. The younger professors tend to be like a little more like, because they're trying to make tenure, so they're like, and that might be good for you, right? Because they're like super gung ho and like they're in the lab next to you cranking out work, right? And if you like that, go with it. Go with maybe generally a younger PI. Mine was more established, so I'd see him like once every couple of weeks and would talk in the hallway, and then like, he made sure I was on the right track. But like, he was like, he knew that I was like, okay, I trust Luis, and he knows what he's doing, and he'll like, and he just and I liked it like that. I work well like that. So was that three? I guess the third one would be like, go to PhD. What's the PhD podcast? Listen to all the episodes.
Absolutely. No, we'll put it on our show notes, the link to the What's the PhD, so that people can go there if they want to find more information. But I would say the same thing. I mean, for me, if I would actually become really good friends with the people that know how to use the instruments.
That's a really good
like the analytical instruments. Because I cannot tell you how many times I was like at an AFM trying to figure out how to do, how to characterize my materials. And I was like hours of just painful learning by myself because the experts had left. So that would be my piece of advice.
That's really good advice, actually. Or here's something off of that a little bit. Like, when I didn't know what I was, I was like a mechanical engineer in a chemistry heavy group. I didn't know what I was doing. As far as the chemistry, I had to learn a lot before I was in the lab. So what I did was I found that in that situation, being the guy who learns the new machine, you're starting at the same point everybody else is, because nobody else knows how to use the machine. So just be that guy.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you kind of become valuable and you're contributing to the group, because they're like, oh, go talk to Luis. He's like, so I became pretty proficient with electron microscopy, both SEM and TEM. And I became like the guy for that. And that's like all sample preparation. And then, like, much to your advice, I became really friendly with the TEM facility manager. And he put me under his wing and showed me like how to do it all. Everything. And it was just great. Like, and I became the go-to guy. And then, like, people in my group, like my advisor was really smart. Like, he was like, I got Luis for like 5 years, like, train him out in this thing now. And then I have like an expert for like the next 4 or 5 years that I could just like send people to. And so I would have people collaborating with me all the time. And it was great. I got to be a valuable member. And while I found my own footing as far as my own research. And so that was pretty valuable. That's really good. That's really good. Now I feel like we should have done an episode on that. That's a really good one.
Well, you still have time. You can have me over for What's the PhD?
That would be great. That'd be awesome.
And then, Luis, now let's close the interview with a little something fun that we do. Imagine a friend of yours is going to visit you in your city, but you are at a pitch, trying to earn some money for your company, and you unfortunately won't be able to show them around. So what would be your top 3 pieces of recommendations for places to do, or places to go to, or things to do in your city?
That's That's awesome. I like this question a lot, and I love the idea of this question. Just I think it's awesome. I listened to some of your previous episodes, and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is like so educational because like now I can go to various cities. So for Dayton, Ohio, and Daytonians are very proud of their city and the entrepreneurial spirit in it. But I would say the Air Force Research Lab actually, because this is the birthplace of the Wright brothers, the Air Force Research Lab has a giant base here that does a lot of research, and right next to it is this amazing Air Force Museum. It's just I will not be able to describe how cool it is. And it's not just like me as an engineer loving watching all these planes. Like people come from out of town, they're just blown away. You basically have like 4 or 5 airplane hangars, and they have like an SR-71 Blackbird, which is I'm a big comic book geek. And so I used to read X-Men comics all the time, and the jet that they rode was the XR-71 Blackbird, and it's the fastest plane in the existence of mankind. The thing flew, at such ridiculous speeds that the protocol for when missiles would be shot up, and it was a spy plane essentially, would be to just outrun the missiles. They just like throw the throttle forward and just outrun it. The thing is, and you get to see like these gigantic engines, and you get to walk right up to it. It's amazing. And they have even presidential planes. They have the plane that you feel the sense of history as you walk through them, like John F. Kennedy sat here and like called people on it. They have like it all set up exactly how it was, and you're walking through history. It's amazing. And they go from biplanes all the way to the most exotic, advanced planes. Like they have an F-22 Raptor, and they're just sitting out there. You can just walk up to it and like check out these planes. It's just unbelievable. That's and it's free. It's free. You just go in and you just spend the day there and just check in all the aviation history. Is just unbelievable. That's a gem. The other thing, Dayton is like a pretty lively city, I gotta say, and Dayton has this ability. I grew up in New York City, right? Like this, like very dynamic, pretty cool city with lots of stuff to do. Dayton is way, way smaller, obviously, but is a city that kind of continuously punches above its weight class, so to speak. And so you go to downtown Dayton, there's like a lively scene. It's dynamic. It's not like New York City, of course. Yeah. But it's enough. And it's kind of cool. And like I said, decent pizza, good food. So I would say the breweries is what I like the best. So find some local microbreweries here. Warped Wing is a really good one. It's an old factory. And Warped Wing it's named after the Wright brothers. That's their invention for how they achieve flight with their plane is how they turn is the warped wing. And so it's an homage to that. And they have it in this old factory with like huge, 4-story high ceilings. And it's just, the scene is amazing and cool and like long tables and lots of beer. And you see kids hanging out with parents and just like, it's kind of got a really cool vibe. So I would say hit that place, hit a lot of the breweries there. A lot of the breweries are great. And then the last thing, I would say to explore some of Dayton's entrepreneurial hub, they revitalized the downtown, especially this one particular area called the Dayton Arcade, which is this beautiful glass domed ceiling structure from over 100 years ago, where Dayton used to be the center of like a lot of trade and whatnot. And so they've redone it and put it into an entrepreneurial space. Like, again, my timing is really perfect for starting my company, because like Dayton has invested like heavily on this, banked on this entrepreneurial spirit. So go to the Dayton Arcade, check that place out, check the whole infrastructure that has emerged around it, from workspaces to different companies, small startups, that they're all surrounding this place called the Dayton Arcade, and that entrepreneurial hub is new and cool, and you feel like you're in Silicon Valley, or something. It's just it's great. Like I dig it, and I think it's those would be my 3 spots.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Luis, for joining us in the podcast today.
Thank you, Jenny. I love this. This is so much fun. If you get me started, I'll talk endlessly about whatever. So
No, this is great.
Awesome. And thanks for capping off a particularly rough lab day with some fun conversation.
Thank you for listening. If you want to put a face to the voices you just heard, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at LatinX Can. If you have questions or feedback, you can email us at latinxcan@gmail.com. And if you want to support our project, please leave a review. We have made it easy for you and added the links to the show notes. That's it for now. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and remember, unidos somos más.